He said Joseph Lindsley has provided something rare in our world of corporate automated radio, regular, real humanity.
I could hear Iranian drones coming toward my building. Ukraine has destroyed a third of Russia's Black Sea fleet.
And emails and texts that have come in asking about you.
The reason why WGN Chicago covered Ukraine every day is because the people of Chicago wanted that.
We go to Ukraine to check in with Joseph Lindsley.
He's the world's most interesting man. Let's go to Ukraine.
800 days must feel like it to you.
Thank you, Joseph, for making us cry this morning.
Hello from Odessa. Hey, Bob, good morning to you. Hello from Kyiv.
3 missiles hitting in quick succession in a way that I've never heard before.
Joe Lindsley with our...
Well, corruption is a very big word.
It was not like a freak out. For me, just imagine winter.
Freedom is our religion.
Like, I have shivers right now because
You defeated Roger Federer when he was number one.
Other Ukrainian and American reports are fair to good, but Joe Lindsley always reaches an excellent standard.
I appreciate Joseph's passion for truth, justice, and the goodness of people.
Joe covers so many fascinating and crucial Ukrainian cultural topics missed by others.
One of the best journalists who provides insight into how war is actually experienced by Ukrainians.
Every weekday, 1,000 days and counting, join the journey from Ukraine with Chicago's WGN Radio.
On this third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we thought it would be appropriate to reconnect with our friend Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Joe, good to be with you again. What is this, day number 1,000 something? Well, we were together for, I think it was 1,027 broadcasts, weren't we?
Indeed, Bob. Hello from Kyiv. Today is 1,095. When this airs, it will be 1,096, I think. And it's been 3 years of this full-scale war. And, you and I spoke, and, I think a lot of people can't really comprehend this, but we spoke every single day from 2022 through the end of 2024. Live every day on WGN Radio. I love it how it was WGN 7:20 a.m. Chicago time, 3:20 here in the afternoon in Ukraine. And thanks to you, WGN did not abandon Ukraine for 3 entire years. And here we are, 3 years later on February 24th, this momentous anniversary.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons we stuck with it was because it became more than just the statistics and what buildings were destroyed. Our conversations, thanks to the time we have on radio and also the conversational format of WGN Radio, you humanize the war. And we even found humor in it occasionally, even though you did all those daily reports through illness, drone attacks, missile warnings, and you were in the mountains sometimes when you talked to us, sometimes in your bunker there. And I think our listeners got close to you and cared about you. You gave us sort of a daily soap opera. It informed and it captivated us, and I think that's one reason why everyone at WGN thought, this is good. This is good broadcasting. And we had some periods, in fact, fairly recently, right before everything kind of took when Israel took the front page with what's going on with their war. There were some stretches in there, I think, especially last summer, where things were relatively quiet as far as developments in Ukraine, but we managed to get some interesting stories out on the air despite that, didn't we?
Yeah, this is, I was new to radio when we started in 2022. I've been intimidated by it. I wasn't intimidated by it because it was the beginning of a war. That was the intimidation. I had never been in a war in my life. And when we first started talking, and so everyone got to kind of grow and develop with me through that experience, what it's like to be in a war. And as I began to travel the country and even to go toward more dangerous places. But, I realized in our conversations in 2022 that if I simply just reported the news in the regular way, it would have become boring. Because if you look at 2022 in the summer, it was Bakhmut. From July on, it was Bakhmut every day. That was actually because Ukraine was starting to do well. Before Bakhmut, a new city was falling every week. But then all of a sudden, everything was stuck in Bakhmut. And that's because Ukraine was holding the line. But if you look at you go back and look at the headlines, it might seem repetitive. And that's when I said, we have this audience who's willing to listen every day. I want to make them feel as though they are here with me, and through the ups and the downs. And so I think that's why we made it, even when there were times of even almost relative calm. I think it was years that we did this, but I think back to the summer of 2023, when I went to the mountains, for example, there was a little bit of a calm, but there still were stories to tell, and there's still, there were stories of heroism, and I think things that could inspire people. And when we took a pause from these regular broadcasts, I went to which was not your choice or my choice, but it's the way things shook out. I went to the mountains in Ukraine, and I never took a day off for 3 years, and so I had some time to really reflect on these 3 years. And I was hiking through the mountains, listening to an audio book of Ernest Hemingway's "For Whom the Bell Tolls," when he was in the Spanish Civil War, and he had this moment. He was still in the war, but he was thinking about, what do I do after the war? Do I just go back to America? And he was at this, he was a little bit lost. He's like, I'm going to miss this. And I really realized then how much I also missed speaking to WGN and to the audience and to you every day. And I said, we still, the mission's not complete. We still have work to do. And as we see now, Ukraine is back in the news cycle. And I know some people ask, okay, why would a local, not any radio station. WGN is one of the most distinguished and historical radio stations in America. But why would they cover Ukraine every day when everyone else wasn't? And I was thinking about this today, Bob, knowing we were going to talk, as I was running through Kyiv, through the ice and the snow, looking at the statue of St. Vladimir overlooking the river. And it was a peaceful, beautiful day here. And, I thought the reason why WGN Chicago covered Ukraine every day is because the people of Chicago wanted that. Not every city, not every place in the world was willing to keep caring all the time. But in Chicago, they did. And because there's a lot of Ukrainians, but I think it's just the values of the people in Chicago, and both Republicans and Democrats and independents. They were willing to stay engaged every day, and they wanted it, as we saw. The audience, they would send donations to help, Ukrainians. They were very engaged, and, there was nowhere else you could go. After, the first 6 months in 2022, the media here began to, slowly start to go to other places around the world and stop the daily coverage. But the people of Chicago wanted it, and they stuck with this for 3 years. And now we see, when the whole world is starting to pay attention again, sort of Chicago, thanks to our show and WGN, Chicago is informed, and they've been with us every step of the way. And so I say that local news for me is what the local people want, even if it might be something very international and geopolitical.
Yeah, well, a couple of things about that. First of all, you definitely struck a chord with our audience, and maybe what you speak of are the great Midwestern values. But here's just a pile of the recent emails and texts that have come in asking about you and asking that we talk to you again. And I think that's a tribute to your reporting, because the best way to tell a big story, a giant story like the war in Ukraine, is to just zero in maybe on a single story, a single incident. And you did that so well, where you told us about maybe it was an injured news reporter. And I just heard today something like 17 media people killed since this war began. So you boiled it down to the stories of these singular individuals, and in that way told a very unique story when you couldn't get anywhere else about the war. And as I said, it became more than just the numbers, and you couldn't get that anywhere else. And radio is a great way to do that. The time we had, the format we had, as I said, but a number of our listeners would write and text and mention that your reports reminded them, and some were too young to remember, but they knew it from history, Edward R. Murrow's famous broadcasts from London during the Blitz. Because in addition to everything I just said, you're also an insider, and you had privy to a lot of information that the rest of the news media didn't have. And you really set us straight on a lot of things, and a lot of misinformation, especially about the cost of arms the United States has given Ukraine, you corrected. And all of that added up to informative, and I will say, somehow, in some ways, an entertaining broadcast every day.
Well, I like to think that for me, as I see it, when I see all the Americans, especially who come to Ukraine, that this to me seems like the world's best self-help book, beyond all the other stuff. But inspiring people doing incredible things, and to be able to share those stories. And I'm so grateful that we had the daily aspect of it, and that it was limited to 10 minutes, which sort of required us to be sharp. Which is important, and I've heard people they miss that and they want that back. But the fact that it was every day allowed for the personal stories to be included, because if it was, say, every week, you got to hit like, okay, what happened? I mean, today we have big news, extraordinary news. President Zelensky here in Kyiv said, "Hey, look, I'll resign if Ukraine gets NATO membership." A nice chess move here, really powerful. By someone who understands theatrics and understands leadership. But if our show had been only, say, once a week, there would have been no room for like the daily personal stories of the soldiers who were killed, some of whom I knew, or the heroism of the foreigners that come here. And so that daily format gave us this opportunity to give everyone a window for just 10 minutes. And I was meeting with a great reporter here maybe a year ago, who I know pretty well from National Public Radio, Joanna Kakisis. She's one of my favorite foreign reporters in Ukraine. And she knew that we did the show, and she's like, yeah, she was introducing me, and she said, oh, Joe does a show once a week. And I said, no, Joanna, it's every day. And I think people couldn't even comprehend that actually we were doing this every day. But indeed we were, and indeed the people of Chicago were listening.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to the success of it, I think, it was organic. It wasn't like we said on day one, look, we're going to talk to you. We'll have a daily report. Now it just kind of evolved, and that's always great. And also, obviously, a lot of interest here. One of our most popular neighborhoods, not that far from downtown, Ukrainian Village. We have more than 100,000 Ukrainians here. Perhaps, if not the most, one of the most populated areas of Ukrainians in the country, and a huge influx of Ukrainian people have come in here, tens of thousands in the last few years. More continue to come. I'm curious, Joseph, about your feelings here. You kind of alluded to it at the beginning of our talk today. I know you can see the end of this one way or the other kind of in sight. In fact, you said to me before we did this that Ukraine could fall in a matter of days. So are you thinking of life after the war now? What's your emotional state at this time?
Well, the one thing that I think is missed a lot in the current stories reporting about Ukraine, everyone's talking about Zelensky, okay, whatever Trump and Russia, whatever deal they might come up with, will Zelensky agree to it? And if you know Ukraine, it's not about one person. It's about the entire country that has withstood, the stories of the people we shared these past 3 years. And I don't see people here quitting. If you're in Lviv in the west, you might hear more people willing to negotiate. But the closer you go to Russia, the closer you go to cities that are under fire, like Nikopol in the south, or especially Kharkiv, 30 miles from Russia, that's the capital of defiance. The Ukrainian city that's closest to Russia, which is it's a bustling city. There's still about 700,000 people there. It's an entrepreneurial, hopeful place despite the attacks. Those people don't want to surrender at all. And I think that this gets missed in the conversations is, the reality in the ground. Like, if you think you're going to divide Ukraine, well, it's actually at this moment, it's the Ukrainians who are closest to Russia who desperately do not want to surrender. So that needs to be injected into the conversation. And so I don't see, when I have a lot of friends and colleagues, some of them I haven't talked to in a while, but I have a lot of friends in the White House, people close to Elon Musk, just because of my previous adventures in the U.S. For years, and I know what they think. I've been talking with a few of them the past weeks, and the first impression I really get from people close to Trump and Musk and others is that when they talk to me, they almost feel guilty because they know that there's something noble here in Ukraine. And my question to them is, okay, even if you don't want to support this, like, can you at least not make up stories about Ukraine? Can you at least, acknowledge what Ukrainians are fighting for? When J.D. Vance gave that speech in Munich, chastising Europe for being weak, there's a lot of truth to that. But he missed the biggest country in Europe, which is Ukraine, which is actually standing strong. And when I talk one-on-one with people close to those in the White House, all of a sudden they're able to see this. And I think the objections to supporting Ukraine are based on a lack of information. And one of the biggest lacks of information is that I think people think that Russia has been playing this game very well the past weeks, projecting this idea that Ukraine is extremely weak. And it's actually not. It's so much stronger than 2022. And I remember, listeners writing in saying times when they could hear fear in my voice. I mean, there were times when things have been pretty, you felt that everything could fall apart. I don't see that here now. And even the fact that, I'm talking to you right now from Kyiv with electricity. Everyone thought we would have no electricity this entire winter. And guess what? There's been not a single problem in 2025. And these are signs of Ukraine's strength, or that the fact that city of Pokrovsk, which there's heavy fighting there every day, all of the experts, from the economists to ex-Pentagon people, they said that city was going to fall in September of last year, and it hasn't fallen. And just like Bakhmut in 2022, and I think the absence of a problem doesn't become a headline, but because of that, I think Washington and the media as well, but especially the White House, they don't have a command of the positive narratives that show that Ukraine is strong and Ukraine can win. They simply don't know it because they're overwhelmed by information and they don't have a clear view of it, including, I think, someone like General Kellogg. His daughter, by the way, General Kellogg's daughter works in Kyiv. She's got a wonderful nonprofit here to help the military. But if you don't have the information sort of packaged in the right way, you can easily miss the best stories. And the last point of that I'll make is the Black Sea. We talk about Crimea and giving Crimea up to letting Russia have Crimea. Okay, but in that conversation, no one says, okay, you realize that Russia's Navy has been forced out of Crimea, in 2023 by Ukraine. Ukraine has destroyed a third of Russia's Black Sea fleet. They had to leave Crimea. So if you give up Crimea, does that mean that the Navy comes back to Crimea? I mean, you're going to erase all this hard work that was done. And I think these stories are not talked about at all right now. Even when I saw that New York Post cover challenging President Trump the other day, saying, hey, Trump, Putin is a dictator. The Post story mentioned why Ukraine is important and why it's good to defend, but it didn't mention any story showing how strong Ukraine is. And I think so that one of my missions is to help people understand that reality as I see it.
And you did that so well, so many mornings, taking us behind the headlines. And we should say that General Kellogg is one of the negotiators there, correct, for the U.S.?
Yeah, he's been appointed as President Trump's envoy to Ukraine. And Trump has another envoy, Witkoff, who's in charge of the Middle East. Mr. Witkoff, but he's focused on the Russia side. But Kellogg is Trump's guy for Ukraine, yeah.
To your point about Ukraine doing well, I heard an independent analyst just today talk about Ukraine, and he said Ukraine is winning the war. And if you look at the casualties suffered by both sides, Russia has suffered far more. Is there a part of you, Joseph, and I know you're a great student of politics, and I know some of what President Trump is doing is perhaps posturing, negotiating. His public statements may be geared to just start a talk. But is there, despite all the problems and the sort of bad blood that's been hurled back and forth between President Trump and President Zelensky, is there something inside of you that is thinking, well, you know what? We were at a stalemate for so long. At least something is happening now. There is some movement toward peace, however rocky it may be. Is that how you feel?
I think I see that. I think a lot of people are struggling to see it that way. But I would say, with the election of Trump, Ukrainians were not. The headline said "Panic in Kyiv." That was inaccurate. People actually saw this as an opportunity, but everyone knew up front that with Trump, the opportunity was like a yes or a no. Not so. The frustration with the previous administration was like the gray in between that knows neither victory nor defeat. It was definitely a slow bleed. There was not a clear plan for victory from the previous administration. That's a clear, I think, consensus here. And so there was an understanding that, okay, with Trump, there's a chance to move things along. And we do see, I mean, the fact that Ukraine's back in the news even is because of, the new situation in Washington. And so there is a chance if it's used well. And so I think this is, this is when Ukraine really has to make its case again. And when I realized in talking with people close to the White House is that they, their objections to Ukraine are almost based on figments. So like, for example, all the money. We talked about the money so often, and like America can't afford this because that's their impression in reading the headlines. But actually, 2023 and 2024 were the best years ever for sales of American weapons to foreign countries. Like our defense industry is booming as a result of this, so America is not actually losing money. And once I explain these things to people, they begin to see a different perspective. So I think this is the challenge now is to, and Russians are really pushing hard with their narratives. But as I think we've seen in our 3 years of conversations, that it always was when Russia was feeling weaker that they would get louder with their threats, and I think we're in that sort of time now. I mean, again, this is Russia's third annual failed winter campaign on Ukraine. We have energy and light, and so Ukrainians are still in the Kursk region of Russia. So I think that is. Things were looking pretty bleak up until November. Now it might look very dire in the moment. And, Bob, I get such different information from people every day. I mean, I had 2 Americans I trust in the past week, one of whom told me, Joe, don't worry, everything's going to be great. Ukraine's got some tricks up its sleeve, suggesting maybe even there's some nuclear capabilities. And then on the other side, another smart American who I also trust and who never panics, saying, "Oh, Joe, Washington might cut everything off in 24 hours and it's going to be pandemonium." What best I can do, these next days is share with you all these different perspectives I'm getting, and then also that what I would call that sort of that steady reality people can carrying on here in Ukraine.
Joel, looking back on 3 years of the war, 3 years of our talks on WGN Radio, anything stand out, particularly memorable to you?
Yeah, Bob, I think of, especially when I would be in a more dangerous place. And one thing I liked about talking on the radio, it gave me more freedom to report in the war. Because if we were on camera, or if I was writing a news article, there's a lot of sensitive things. So if you can't show, especially after a missile strike. But because we're talking on the radio, I could share with the audience exactly what I was seeing, and in a way that didn't compromise any security rules here. And so the radio sort of gave that space to tell the story in a way that I would have been limited using video. And then moreover, radio pushed me to realizing that, I can't add a picture to my story, and I have to go deeper to help the audience understand it, like even describe the smells, or I have to the emotions of everything, and so I think so often of all the different. It was amazing in a way that in all of our broadcasts, Bob, those 10 minutes or so every day, there never was a missile strike, but there often was one like right before and right after. And you never hope for that, but I'm like, oh, I would, you want the audience to feel what it's like, and we always missed it by a minute or so. And I think of one day that for me showed how important this was for me, and I hope for the audience. It was October 10th, 2022. When it was one of Russia's worst attacks. They crippled Ukraine's infrastructure. We had no ability to communicate. There was no internet. That was the scariest day because you couldn't talk to anyone. You didn't know, there was no ability to communicate, which is the great strength of the Ukrainians. And so I had no way to even get in touch with your producers. All morning I'm trying to figure it out, but I said, this is 2022, October 10th. I said, damn it, I'm going to find a way to connect to WGN. I found there was a monastery where our news bunker. I can start to reveal details about our news bunker now because it's more safer. But it was in the basement of this monastery that had been rebuilt after Soviet times, and it was a history of resistance there to Soviets. And we had our newsroom in the bunker, in the basement of the monastery. Our news bunker in the basement of the monastery. And I went to ask the monks in the monastery. I said, do you guys have gasoline? Because they had stockpiled gasoline. I found gasoline. I found a generator. I found a Starlink. I was running. You couldn't text anyone because everything was shut down. And I brought all this stuff together. And I was able to connect. I think we went on air a couple minutes early that day. But I said, we're not missing this for no excuse. And I think that moment when I really said, this is something that we have to continue doing.
When Neil Steinberg, the columnist from the Sun-Times, wrote about you and our broadcasts, he said Joseph Lindsley has provided something rare in our world of corporate automated radio, regular, real humanity. And I think that is what really got to the listeners. And obviously, as you alluded to, I mean, a lot of people care about Ukraine here, not just the Ukrainians. We had a big rally Saturday afternoon at the Wrigley Building to commemorate the 3rd anniversary of the invasion. It was organized by the nonpartisan Illinois division of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Obviously, we heard from all these organizations over our 3 years because we were doing this, and I mean, we got, and you talk about also being able to laugh a little bit. Well, we got so many amazing letters and emails and texts from the listeners, and I'm looking at one we just got the other day. I mean, people, it's incredible what people sent. This person in one of the suburbs around here sent us a wrapper from something called Cookies for Santa, baked milk biscuits, and in the note he said how much he enjoyed hearing you, Joseph, and he said, look at the back label, Bob, and I look at the back and it says a product of Ukraine. So it was pretty interesting the kinds of responses we got from our listeners over the 3 years, other than the obvious, which is so appreciated the information and the perspective from Ukraine. And it's a credit to you, Joe. I mean, we have here in our WGN trophy case a statue. It's the Illinois Silver Dome Award, which recognizes the best of the best in Illinois broadcasting. Last year, we submitted our broadcasts. You won, and we can't wait for you to be able to come to Chicago and pick it up here at WGN Radio. So we're proudly displaying it in the meantime.
Oh, Bob, well, thank you. And I wonder. I know it's so great to have that deep connection with the listeners, including some who traveled here to volunteer, and really to, they were fully a part. They still are fully a part of this war. in a way that you never could have done in years past, interactive in that sense. But Bob, I wonder for you, was there how? I mean, you have a storied broadcasting career. How I mean, but you very uniquely chose not to give up on this for years. And when everyone else said, "Okay, we'll move to something else," we'll migrate to weekly formats or whatever. And why did you stick with this? And what how does this affect your? Did this transform you in any way too? These conversations.
Well, I mean, even though my parents have roots in Ukraine, you made me care even more. And, this whole thing, there was a lot of serendipity involved. As I mentioned, this whole thing was kind of organic the way it grew. We didn't plan a lot of this. And I think because of the way you did this, look, I have a very short attention span. And in my head, I'm always thinking, the listener's got his or her finger on the dial right now, and they've had it. That's it. And I have a quick trigger finger. Management here at the station always kids me about not having a lot of patience for callers who don't get right to the point. And so, but I realized early on that what you were doing was providing news analysis, but also, as I said, almost a soap opera of life there and your life there. And and I know this sounds a little weird to say about a serious war, because of the entertainment value, because sometimes we found humor, because of the humanity, as Neil Steinberg said in his Sometimes column, I knew it was just plain good radio. And yes, it's a national story, but it affected everybody. It's one of those big stories that, even though it is a national story, and what we try to do at WGN is be hyper local here. I want to do that. We all want to do that here, give people something they can't get anywhere else. But you are giving people something they can't get anywhere else, even though it was a national story. And this particular national story affected so many people. And now, as you say, it's really come to the front page again. So I think that's a long way of answering your question, which is basically, you know what? It was just damn good radio. And for that reason, I had no qualms about sticking to it. And you talk about a happy accident. You weren't even supposed to be there in Ukraine all this time, were you?
No. I was traveling the world when the pandemic started, and quite happy to. I'd run away from journalism too, in my former career in America, and was quite happy to be moving around the world. And and then when the pandemic started, I got stuck in Ukraine, and I said, this is a free place. I'm going to stay here, and it was a great time. It was a little responsibility and a great time in my life, and. But then, we knew what this was going to happen, and I said, I know I have to stay here, I've always been a journalist in the sense of someone seeking and pursuing the truth, and as a journalist, like my side on this is clear. I stand with freedom. That I believe in free speech, and I want to be with the people who will fight for that, and that is that bias is always obvious from the beginning. But so I said I have to stick with it, but there was no particular plan, and we faced the war in that hellish, insane day on February 24th, 2022, which I feel a little bit sick even thinking about it. It's hard to. I was such a different person then, and so was everyone here. I think so was our audience, even in Chicago, because they were with us every day, and the whole world shook. For everyone here, and we didn't know what to expect, but you sort of made a decision to say, okay, we're going to face whatever comes our way, and you find these new strengths that you never knew you had, an insane strength to face your fears. Yesterday, Bob, I was doing another podcast here in Kyiv. I could hear Iranian drones coming toward my building, and I just stayed. I kind of listened a little bit to see how close it was coming and if it was going to change direction. And I could never have imagined that I would ever do that in 2022. But it was a serendipitous connection with you and making the show that made me stick with it.
Well, it was your honest approach to it, and that's what made listeners care. That's why our response was tremendous, and that's why in those 3 years of broadcasting, and as you say, unbelievable, that we always managed to connect. One or two times maybe it was late or interrupted, and because the listeners cared about you, whenever that would happen, we were flooded with messages. Is Joseph okay? We didn't know whether the Russians were jamming you or something happened to you. And those times where we weren't right on time with our regular chat, people were very concerned. And, once you get a listener to feel that way, you've got them.
Yeah, and I would remember they'd write in saying, "Oh, Joe sounds tired today," or a little bit anxious about stuff, and I'm glad that's a part of the reporting too. You can polish it up, later on, but you're missing the actual real emotion that reflects what people feel here. And there was one day where I think I almost got myself in a bit of trouble, but I'd been through 15 missiles had hit within a few minutes in Kharkiv. And it was one of those days where there was no power and internet, and but by then we were used to that. But this was sometime last year, and I was angry. I was so angry, and I expressed that in my report, and that did get some negative. There always is negative feedback, which is good to keep things honest. But I remember that particular day, I might have moved a little bit more out of the realm of reporting and just saying, what the hell? This has to stop. But it was always real.
We got a lot of feedback on that. As I think you've discovered, one of the great, powerful things about radio is you get to talk to tens of thousands of people one at a time. And it becomes very personal. And you still have to use it the right way, and you did.
Well, Bob, and it was thanks to you, thanks to WGN and the audience, and I think as we look at, there's a lot of great people I've met who are covering, telling the story of the war, but what we have done together is unique for its consistency and its regularity, and I think also for that human approach, which I think that's what Neil Steinberg said, regular, real humanity, but you enabled that to happen, and I had to develop to sort of find and learn that ability to talk about those stories. And so I think my pitch to anyone who will want to listen is that's what we continue to offer, and we won't give up on this. These very concise, today's a longer conversation, but these concise windows into the reality here, while the whole world is talking about it, if you want to know what people really are feeling in Ukraine, not just Ukrainians, but also the foreigners here. And I think it can get a little bit zesty too, because of I do have a bit of a sense of what's happening in the White House. So I promise to do my best to share the inside scoop as far as I can on what's really happening here in a way that affects the entire world, including Chicago.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old Paul Harvey bit. You've heard the news. Now you'll hear the rest of the story, right?
Every day, Bob, every day.
Well, all right, Joe, take care of yourself. Stay safe there. And as developments warrant, we hope to hear from you. And I know you'll keep us posted. I've enjoyed not just our conversations on the air, but also our off-the-air chats as well. And Joe Romano and Haley Boyd and the rest of our staff, too, really feel like you're part of us now.
As well, and I miss talking with them, but we will continue in whatever ways we can find. And it was great to have Haley and Joe with their coolness and their sympathy for everything that was happening as we were preparing to go on air every day. Sometimes, one time I remember driving. We were driving insanely fast because we'd come under fire in Zaporizhia, and how calm and cool your team was to get through that. And And as always, I continue reporting. If you follow me at JP Lindsley on X, on Instagram, and YouTube, or through our website, UkrainianFreedomNews.com, we'll continue reporting and look forward to what we can, what formats we can come up with to keep going here. And as always, I want to get back, Bob, to when we always said until tomorrow, Bob.
That's right. And before we go real quick, you just reminded me of several times I heard in my ear right before we went on the air, we've lost our connection. We've lost our connection. Somehow you always came through for us. Thanks, Joe.
Hey, thank you, Bob. Indeed. I mean, Bob, most of our conversations, I feel, I know you very well, but almost every conversation we've had is also with the audience. We've had a few conversations here and there, but it's very real and authentic in that way. And we had just finished recording this podcast here, and then we were talking, and then we said, wait a second, why are we not recording? Put the recording back on, because everything we say should be recorded, right? But it was a conversation about how did this start?
I don't know when it was, but we were months into this, and I didn't remember. And I walked into the control room and said to Haley and Joe, how did we start this? Where did we get Joe? How did we find him? I couldn't even remember.
I remember quite well. It was because in the weeks before February 24th, 2022, there was not a lot of foreign press in Ukraine. And so different media would sort of scrambling to find people. And because I once had been at the Weekly Standard and Fox and all that, somehow people started calling me. And I would go on News Nation, sort of sister network on television side of WGN. And I went on News Nation, and then somehow that connected me to some other people in WGN. And you and I talked a few times before it. I remember it was I was on air on News Nation maybe an hour before the full-scale invasion started. And there was a retired American general on, there were a few other people, and all the experts were saying that Ukraine is going to collapse quickly. And I had been insisting all week, but I was very insistent that day that I don't see that happening. Based on everything I knew about this country. And I remember the host of that show, she said, she almost thought I was like too partisan about Ukraine. She said, okay, we're going to let you go. Good luck there. And I got off, went off air, and about an hour later, I had a text from a friend who had worked at the Pentagon, very high security clearance, and she knows stuff. And she texted me only these words. She said, I shall walk through the valley of the shadow of death, yet I shall fear no evil. And when I got that message, I knew, that's all she had to say. I knew that the war had started. And maybe within 6 minutes or so, friends in Kharkiv started texting me and calling me saying that they were being bombed. And that was that first moment. But then I remember when we went on air the following Monday, that was a Thursday, the following Monday, I remember distinctly, and we can pull up this clip, but you said that you thought I was crazy. You and a lot of people thought I was crazy the previous week because not many people were saying that Ukraine was strong. And I remember you kind of made a promise, Bob. You said, well, I'm going to keep talking to you every day because you were right that Ukraine was not going to lose in 3 days. So
yeah. I mean, that's right. And I think you just gave me an idea for the title of the book, since this was such a unique way it started and we got together. I mean, maybe it should be Joseph Lindsley, the accidental broadcaster.
Nice. Well, we need your name in there too, of course. But I like this. I like this idea. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, right. My general manager does refer to our thing here as my bromance. Yeah, it's a chance bromance. There's your
chance bromance.
Chance bromance.
Yeah. I mean, it is this. Two different worlds. There's Chicago and here in the war, and yet by talking every day, it's Yeah, there should be a film version too, Bob, one day. But
Hey, a bromance with our listeners. Great.
Every weekday, 1,000 days and counting. Join the journey from Ukraine with Chicago's WGN Radio.